just women are in danger, but all marginalized people, where being uniquely different right now might truly be considered a crime. It seems as though we had all slipped into a false sense of comfort, that justice would prevail and that good would win in the end. Well, good did not win this election, but good will win in the end. So what today means is that we are far from the end. Today marks the beginning of our story. The revolution starts here. The fight for the right to be free, to be who we are, to be equal. Let's march together through this darkness, and with each step, know that we are not afraid. That we are not alone. That we will not back down. That there is power in our unity, and that no opposing force stands a chance in the face of true solidarity. And to our detractors that insist that this march will never add up to anything,
Boston Red here with Friday Java, a weekly magazine of political theory, polling, and commentary. It is part of the history called people that make up this fascinating journey. We are part of the Obama network. For that, we make no apologies. What we pledge to do is give you the facts on a bridge to history. What body politics is, the most up-to-date theories of political science and psephology. Stay tuned for this incredible ride. Boston Red, peace out.
Friday Java. On the 27th of July, 2018, from WBRN Radio and streaming on the Boston Red Network. We're on various outlets, the iHeart Radio app, you can find us there, Stitcher, Spotify, and various other outlets around the net on YouTube. We have audio there. We are going to do the video part. We just haven't got around to it yet, but we will do that in August. We're also planning, depending on the technical situation over at Blog Talk, we don't know how long Blog Talk will be there. They merged with Speaker. Anyway, nonetheless, it's now under a holding company, and evidently, the last thing I've seen, they are now starting to migrate to their one platform. Now, if they will have available the talk show part, I'm not sure about that. But we'll schedule one for next week, I believe. The latter part of next week, we'll try and see if we can do that, and we'll post that on the Blog Talk part there. And we'll just have to see how that works. We'll have some numbers out this morning for the Q2. We'll bring those in on Numbers Man. That's our financial program, economics program. And we deal with macroeconomics. That is on the weekend. And we're moving on about 9 o'clock now, a little late today. But nonetheless, that report should be out, and we should have at least the preliminary part. Won't go into the full impact of it. We'll do that on Numbers Man. And I'm not certain if we'll have an open source report this weekend or not. We had one last week. It's on some of the same channels. That is our technology report from the world of open source, hardware, software, Libre software, etc. We present that roughly about every 2 weeks, sometimes we're a little bit tardy, as they'd say, in presenting it. But we do have a July one up there. As much information out. Google has just completed their cloud conference, and there's some interesting information there about AI, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and we'll probably present a little bit of it, some components that they have open sourced to the community that are very important in setting up open source applications. We'll go more into that on the open source report, but let's get on with the business at hand here. Dr. Sabato, he's at the University of Virginia, Charlottesville, and we always remember Herbert Heyer, who was killed by white supremacists in Charlottesville. A very sad situation there. But his crystal ball, the subject matter here is the House tilts towards Democrats. This is by Carl Kleindick. He's the managing editor of the Crystal Ball on July the 24th. They came out on Tuesday, and it is a summer month, so the summer months are a little bit different. Let me just get to takeaways here, and we do have some polling as we move along here. The Democrats are a little better than 50-50 to win the House. This is the first time this cycle we are going beyond 50-50. Our own ratings at the Ouija board, that's our counterweight to the crystal ball. That's what it's turned into now, crystal balls, Ouija boards, etc. We are looking at, as we move into August, and particularly in September, that is usually the official start date for campaigning. People start to pay a little bit of attention after the summer holidays, etc., after a Labor Day, and now the cycles are a little bit different. We go into mid-October, where the polls really start to shape up. But we are seeing some shaping up here on our slide rule model. We have two models here that we use. We would say 50-50, perhaps a little better. We're having some races that are coming around that had not come around, and other races are tied up, as LBJ would say, as tight as Dick's proverbial headband. In other words, they're in the margin of error, and we look at polling to see exactly where things are here. DJ Trump has been touring the Midwest, trying to see if he can shore up his basic support. He's come out with some farm subsidies, something the Republican Party has decried for a very, very long time, the core conservative part of the Republican Party. But it's roughly about $12 billion. What the program is a program where they will buy the surplus, the federal government, and that will go into the bins, so to speak. He was also at some steel facilities across the river from St. Louis in Illinois, downstate Illinois. But one of the things to note about particularly the steel plants, most of them are a shatter of what they were at one time, roughly 1,000 workers or so. Some a little more, but most a little less. The action in the steel industries in roll steel, a prefab steel, and those are smaller plants, usually running anywhere from 100 to perhaps a little under 500 workers. And those are the ones that are in trouble, no doubt about it. And that is some of the core support, as in manufacturing. But one of the things to remember here about manufacturing, it is much less of the economy than it was, say, during the Reagan years. And in a global economy, a modern capitalist economy, the types of actions that he's taking do not work, period. Now, the so-called agreement with the EU, that is one of the strange things with the EU and how the EU worked the tariff regime. The automobile part of it, they haven't worked that one out yet. but yet autos in the U.S. are off this year, and another part of the economy that's not performing very well for a number of reasons. We'll go into that again on the numbers man part is the automobile sector. It has been down. So let's get to some of the ratings here. We're making, 17 House rating changes. One of those in Ohio, 12. And let's look at some of those. French Hill, that is in Arizona, too, from like a Republican to lean Republican. Buchanan in Florida, 16, lean Republican. Won't go over it. Charlie Tuna Chris, likely Democrat to a safe Democrat. Remember Charlie Tuna? He ran for governor there in Florida. Steve King, he is in Iowa 1, likely Republican. He's a right-wing type. He's been around Iowa for a very, very long time. Ruckin, that is out of Illinois, 6, was lean Republican Peter Ruckin, to a toss-up. Hollingsworth is in Indiana, 9. It was lean Republican, a safe Republican now to likely Republican. Jackie Orikoski in Indiana, 2, like a Republican. It was at one time, what was it? What was that score? They're safe Republicans. They moved that one over. Bear, he is in Kentucky, 6, it looks like. There's a toss-up now. That is Andy Barr, excuse me, I said Bear, Barr. Mike Bishop, he is in Michigan, 8. Let's get my screen a little bit here. That's also moved to a toss-up. And some of the open races here, Pence that would be from like a Republican to lean Republican. New Mexico, 2nd. That's an open seat nonetheless. Anyway, Steve Schabach, that is Ohio 1. That's now a toss-up. And there's a special in Kentucky, Ohio 12th. That is moved to a toss-up also. It was like a Republican. And Kelly in Pennsylvania, 16, from safe Republican to like a Republican. Some of these are trending. Carter is in Texas, 31. It still is like a Republican's new rating there. Cumberson, that's another Texas, 7, to a toss-up. John Cumberson, they did lean Republican. And open seat was Jenkins' seat. This is in West Virginia, 3. It's now a toss-up there. Crystal Ball House ratings. A bunch of the toss-ups here. Durham in California, Knight in California, 25. California 10 was Durham. Ruffenbacher in California, 48. Mimi Waters, she's been around a long time. That's a toss-up race. That's California, 45. There's an open one in 39. That used to be Royce. These are all toss-ups here. Cupertino in Florida, 26. Ron Blum in Iowa, 1. Dave Young, that's another Iowa, 3. Boos in Illinois, 12. Rockham in Illinois, 6. There's an open seat in Kansas. That's Jenkins. That's a toss-up there. Bishop in Michigan, 8. Another toss-up. Another open seat in Michigan is also a toss-up. Jason Lewis in Minnesota is a toss-up. Eric Paulson in Minnesota is a toss-up. In North Carolina, Pittinger, that's an open seat. Leon Lance, that is in Jersey, 7. John Fasco, New York, 19. Tenery, let's see what. Tenery, New York, 22. Charbot in Ohio, 1. A toss up there. Fitzpatrick, sorry about that, in Pennsylvania, 1. Pennsylvania, 7 is open. That used to be dense seat. Culberson in Texas, 7. Will Hurd, that's in Texas, 23. Dave Brett, he's the guy that ousted the former speaker. That's Virginia, 7. Scott Taylor, Virginia, 2. Rachel, that's Washington, 8. And Wisconsin, 1. That's old Paul Ryan's seat. They put that in a toss-up. And West Virginia, that's an open seat there. And some Democratic seats that are toss-ups. Waltz, that is Minnesota, 1. It used to be his, and Minnesota, 8. It used to be Rick Nolan in Minnesota. They are in the toss-up category. Leans Democrat in Arizona, 2. McSally. And open 1, Isa, that's California, 49. Florida, 27. Ross Latham, she retired. Sheila Porter, that's New Hampshire, 1. Nevada, 4, that's an open seat, and Nevada 3, also an open seat. Likely Democrat here. O'Halloran, that's in Arizona, 1. Another open seat in Arizona, 9. Army Barra in California, 7. Jackal in, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, California, 24. And Connecticut, 5, there's an open seat there. Murphy in Florida, 7. Peterson in Minnesota, 7. These are likely. Goffenmeyer in Jersey, 5. Maloney in New York, 18. And Cartwright in Pennsylvania, 8. And they have an open seat also in PA, 6. Used to be Costello. So these are some of the situations here. The rating changes. We've already went through that. And let's see if they have anything else here. The Ohio special election. Get out the old cheaters here. Let's see what we got here. The final special election schedule in November comes in northern Columbus suburbs. There, Tory Bladerson, and that's in Franklin County, is Columbus. Danny O'Connor, the Democrats, to replace Representative Pat Tobert, the Republican there, who resigned his seat for a more lucrative job at the Ohio Business Roundtable. That sort of figures. The 12th special election at leans Republican for several reasons. This is a district that Trump won by 11 points, and is probably more Republican than that. So now you're going to see in some of these districts that Trump won by, let's say, 10 to 15 points. He's more Republican, but there was some resistance there. Two compelling factors at work in Ohio 12. The local Pacifics and the national trend. For a while it appeared as though the local Pacifics, a decent GOP candidate in Bolison and the GOP Historic Strength in the district were guiding the race. This usually happens many times. It can, though, be a problem. The election approach, the national trends may be asserting themselves, in what are not normal circumstances. Democratic enthusiasm. Well, there's a lot of enthusiasm out there. We'll get to an article in the Post about women in Ohio and how that is influencing a number of things. Now, there are obviously trends that are related just to the economy, and some of those we'll look at later in the broadcast. This basically winds us up. It basically means that the party that wins half of the toss-ups, 18 of 36 for Republicans and 19 of 36 for Democrats, will be the majority party. At this point, we see the Democrats with a slightly better odds to get the required share of toss-ups based largely on the environment. Well, environment is one of the big problems. It's always a wild card, especially with somebody like DJ Trump. Say, for instance, if there were an armed conflict with Iran or something like that, could sway the polls depending on how the public would view the particular situation. So those are some of the wild cards there. Rally around the flag, boys and girls, the old rally situation there. The economy, a little bit hard to predict on that. August, September, we are looking at numbers that are not so good, and then from Q2, we'll see where Q2 is actually in the scheme of things, but that in itself is a little bit hard to predict at this point in time. Let me just check here to see if we can get, I think we may have it. We'll see. Okay, the gross national product increased at an annual rate of 4.1% in Q2. That's according to the advanced estimate of the Bureau of Economic Analysis. So this is what we were waiting on. Very unusual. I believe that would track back. Let's see. Domestic product. This is from them, and we'll just do this live here. I have to go to a different server to do it. 4.1, this is the advanced analysis, which means it's subject to change. The increase in GDP is the second quarter, reflects positive contributions from personal consumption expenditures, that is what's called PCE, exports, non-residential fixed investment, federal government spending, and state and local government spending that were partially offset by negative contributions from private inventories, and residential fixed investments. Imports are a subtraction in the calculation there. So I think we'll leave this at where we are, and we'll revisit this on a Numbers Man, our financial report. But we thought we would get it in, and we wouldn't want DJ Trump to claim that we were in the fake news business. Anyway, let's get back to the other parts here. And this is from the Los Angeles Times. Trump celebrates his tariff policies with workers in Illinois and amidst complaints from Midwest farmers. He's at a U.S. Steel facility here a day after announcing a truce in the tariff war with Europe. Trump returned to his protectionist script during two stops across the Midwest, touting the reopening of an Illinois steel plant as proof his tariffs are helping workers. Well, despite opposition from regional farmers hurt by the national retaliatory tariffs on agricultural products, and from the farmers Republicans representing Congress, he urged patience. This is DJ Trump. This is a time to strengthen our worst trade deals ever made by any country in the history of the earth. Well, that's very unusual. He was talking to steel workers at United States steel mill in Granite City, Illinois, across evidently from St. Louis. However, instead of turning to tariffs against trading partners in recent months, expanded his line stance to steel workers, and Trump has big dumb piggy bank, and everyone was rubbing it blind. I suppose this is, we lost our business, we lost our jobs to other countries, he said, but now we are fighting back and we are winning. Well, that is obviously a difference there. Captured the unpredictable swings that have marked its trade policy, the celebration reopening of two blast furnaces, which the steel company attributes to the 25% tariffs imposed on steel, came a day after he held a Rose Garden ceremony with the European Commission. Trade policies again shaping up a significant political issue heading into November. This is what we talked about a little bit here, yet it seems to hedge on the mood swings of a president who has been skeptical about trade partners. Yet Trump is now confronting a predicted downsides of tariffs. The problem with tariffs is that it takes a while for them to work through the economy. Will they work through the economy in sufficient numbers? I will use numbers here to affect the November election. Some perhaps not, and that is one of the big problems. The NBC Wall Street Journal polling will get into some of this by 2-1 margin. Believe the tariffs will be harmful. Most voters in the economy. Those polls have been fairly consistent out here, and part of that is the travailing policy of the federal government. If we go back to President George H.W. Bush on to his son G.W. Bush in the 2000s, and before that we have Bill Clinton, Bill Clinton. All of their policies were quote-unquote free trade type policies. So we see the WTCO, the World Trade Organization, coming in. We remember out marching against it out in Seattle. You don't hear very much about them anymore. There was rumors Trump wanted to remove the U.S. From that regime. So we don't know exactly where that is. But this type of trade policy we've not seen since the Holly Smoot tariffs, which historians cited as one of the causes of the Great Depression, as opposed to our last depression in 2007-2008. So in other words, the verdict is out on that and the damage that is done. But we have other factors out there also is in the consumer spending. Consumers are spending on credit cards, otherwise known as plastic, and they're becoming to see delinquencies on those credit card accounts. And we also see consumers with mortgages not able to pay them. We don't see the types of bankruptcies you want to see that was in the Depression. But those things do add up, and confidence will go down. One of the things that has happened here, and this always happens with these so-called tax cuts, which provide some temporary stimulus, but people go through that very rapidly. Whatever they received, extra $50, $60 in a paycheck is already accounted for now, and has basically disappeared from their discretionary budgets. So that is one factor there. And also you have inflation that has moved up, and of course the Fed has to counter inflation. So those are real-time economic items. He went on to say, farmers love me, they voted for me. Well, the farmers voted for Tricky Dick Nixon, and then, of course, they had the banners on their tractors in places like Des Moines, Iowa. And we were out there trying to save the farms that I said Tricky Dick Nixon. That was Ronald Reagan. Anyway, Reagan had destroyed. So I wouldn't gauge that as a solid thing. What tends to happen in traditionalist conservative communities, many times they will go for the candidate that they perceive is, and Trump's a little bit different because, again, he's not the traditional Republican candidate. He's not Reagan. He's not a father figure, anything of that nature. But due to various elements in the community, particularly in Iowa, the religious nutty contingency obviously votes conservative. And then you have other people in the rural communities that voted conservative in Iowa. And it's one of those situations that it allowed Trump, the same thing in Ohio, to get ahead. A lot of that was in Iowa, the Democratic Party organization not being as existent as it could be, and also the run up there. Bernie Sanders won that primary, and it just stuck out, no matter what people have to say. I was talking to a lady on the subway about the situation there and the malpractice on the part of Hillary Clinton in the 2016 election. You can talk about all kinds of things, such as the Russian interference, etc. But with that interference, and this is something we'll be hashing out here, what was the actual percentage of votes that the interference got? We can't get it exactly, but we can look at it. Versus voter suppression. Voter suppression is very important in states like Ohio, in Boss Walker's Wisconsin, scrubbing people from the rolls in Scott's Florida, some of the basic, and in Pennsylvania also. So if you have 1% or even 0.5% of the people scrubbed are in under these voter ID laws dissuaded from voting, or the cancellation of opportunities to vote, that does count. And obviously you're going to have all kinds of publicity out. You've had that all the time, such as people on traditional urban radio, we'll call it, African American radio, slide in there, talking about super predators. Super predators are out there. It's still out there. But this is one of the things that they used on Hillary Clinton. The other thing, obviously, to a little different audience, was the crooked Hillary. But that was a situation that forced correspondents on NBC, ABC, to actually ask the monster, was she corrupt? She, of course, didn't answer the question. But now we see the machinations of this administration, and the voters are starting to decide who is the most corrupt. Anyway, this was the LA Times. We appreciate coming from the West Coast here. And let's see. We'll go to Twitter here. The interesting thing, we talked about this. Monthly users fell by 1 million in the second quarter, Q1, after purging the fake news and suspicious accounts. They haven't got them all. There was a time that you could, when Twitter was in its formal stages, you could, and you still see some of this, purchase Twitter accounts. Most of them fake, obviously. And let's say you purchased, I don't know, 1,000, 5,000 Twitter accounts. It got you going because it showed people you had some synergy. And, based upon that, you'd have 6, 7, 8,000, maybe 10,000 before it was over, etc. So this is, some of it suspended, 1 million accounts a day. 1 million accounts a day in May and June. Slated to keep the pace through July. Twitter said that it has 35 million active average users, down from 36 million the previous quarter. the 1 million loss came from the U.S. So you start talking about that. It does mean something. And also the trouble over at Facebook. They've lost about 20% of the value of Facebook. And we'll talk about this on our financial report. But when your valuation stock goes down, it does affect other social media such as the Google and various others. One of the problems we've had with these social media organizations, they've all been, the old term is talked up by various analysts. That's happened all the time, but you'll see Google out there, and in the EU they are starting to get some regulations that stop a lot of the hanky-panky that has not evolved in the U.S. Users in the U.S. Don't traditionally care as much about their privacy. They are accustomed to these massive violations, etc. But the rest of the world, this is very important here, a lesson in elementary economics. When you get to be the Googles, etc. of the world, your growth in North America is starting to bottom out, or has bottomed out. So you have to go to the rest of the world. And if the rest of the world rejects your methods, you're in trouble, as you see with much of the social media here coming up. Let's move on from this to Claire McCaskill. Interesting situation. Vulnerable Democrat running for re-election, targeted in hacking attempts. That'll go a long ways in Missouri. One of the more vulnerable Democrats running for re-election was targeted by Russian hackers who sought but failed to compromise her Senate computer network. Russia continues to engage in cyber warfare against our democracy, as Sinclair said in a press release on Thursday evening. While this attack was not successful, it's outrageous that they think they can get away with this. I'm not intimidated, and this will be a major issue. And the reason it's a major issue is it can still be tied to the Trump administration. Incidentally, old DJ Trump has canceled the scheduled meeting between he and V.I. Putin till next year after the election. The hackers who belong to a supposedly military group, GRU, targeted two other candidates in the running in the Midwest, as according to a Microsoft executive there, Tom Burt, who spoke. This was the Aspen Security Forum. We'll have to cover this on open source. He didn't identify the candidates. The Daily Beast reported on it, who is a ranking Democrat on the homeland. This is Claire McCaskill. Justice Department announced some indictments, and there was a move in the House, an idiotic move to impeach the assistant at the Justice Department. That's a stupid move. At Aspen, Burt said three candidates were targeted using phishing, spear phishing, a common hacker technique to get targets to open email that appears legitimate but lures the victim to a malware. He said Microsoft discovered a fake Microsoft domain or website that hackers had created to spearfish people. We took down that domain and worked with the government. Actually were able to avoid someone being infected by it. She's expected to face Josh Hockley. He's the Attorney General there in Missouri. So we'll see how that works out in Missouri. All politics being a local, Claire will run her race. Let me just move right along here. Jerry Jones called Trump's interest in the NFL anthem issue problematic. Jerry Jones been around a long time. Jerry Jones, Mr. Jones, actually took a kneel with his players during the so-called controversy. However, it didn't stop Trump from saluting Jones. Way to go, Jerry. Well, that's the only thing he could do. Cowboy players reported a training camp in Oxnard, California. Days early, Jones held forth in a news conference, which he admitted that, like most people who wish the anthem controversy would simply go away. Very smart thing there, but it continues on because the media pushes it. So that is Mr. Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones also stood by the team's relationship with Papa John. Papa John is suing his own company. He issued a racial slur, "Old Papa John." Those teams do not have the same relationship the Cowboys have with Papa John's. A business in Texas, Jones said, "We own 50 Papa John's stores in Texas and feel strongly that our Cowboys are the face, oh boy, of Papa John." Schneider was in hot water when he linked his company's earning drops to the TV ratings in the NFL and the anthem. He claimed, well, he's out of the ball game here. Anyway, so much for old Papa John. We'll go to Ohio here, and we'll look at some numbers here. This is Dublin, Ohio. Becky von Zesro. Alton votes Republican. Her affluent central suburb there. Her disaffection with DJ Trump has convinced her to back the Democrat in the special election there in Ohio. Interview with dozens of women, mostly Republicans in the Midwest state's 12th congressional district. Several say they would buck their voting habits and support the Democratic candidate in that district. Strategists are winning over white, educated suburban women in dozens of leaning districts. That means Madonna was right. About the women's movement retaking some House districts, there are a lot of women. The Democrats need to net 23 is the magic number. 26 would be better. O'Connell faces another Trump-banked Democrat named Troy Halverson. Whether Democrats can attract enough moderates. I'm shocked. I don't know why Trump said those things. That is from Von Zepperin. She's 51 years old, a lifelong Republican in a affluent district. Balderson is a Christian conservative who supports Trump's, this is Balderson, call for the wall. Anyway, they're running the Nancy Pelosi card. I'm not sure how far that will get them out here. Tell voters he is engaged to a Republican, said he will work with the Trump infrastructure and opiate crisis. So he's a middle of the road in Congress. I put Ohio families first, to be honest with anyone, including the president who fails to represent our interests. And he brings up Helsinki here. Another person, Jill Siegel, she's 49, a mother of two, in New Albany, that's in Ohio, where the median income is $191,000. Said Balgerson's ties to Trump were pushing her to vote Democratic. Trump's comments in Helsinki didn't sit well with me, Siegel said. He said she said who said she voted for Hillary to Monster Clinton. So there you go. But he does get some 62-year-old person named Nancy Smith. Doesn't really mean anything there. Let me just do the polling here. We're running a little later here, but we'll look at the latest polls. We'll get the rest of the polls on the week that was. We can't get everybody, but there's a lot of polls out here on a Thursday in Florida. This is Florida Atlantic University has got up by 4. In Wisconsin, this is in the Republican primary. Nicholson's up by 10. Tammy Baldwin's up by 15. That's Democratic primary. NBC Marsh's poll. This is Tammy Baldwin's up by 17 on Volumi. And Nielsen, she's up by 15. We move on to Michigan. Stabenow, James versus Stabenow, she's up by 18, double digits there. And another Stabenow here up by 15 points. And out of Minnesota, it's been a race we've been looking at. This is NBC News, Marsh's poll. Smith is ahead, according to them, by 14 points over Halsley. We've seen that dead even. Out of California, Feinstein's up by 22. Nothing unusual there. Michigan governor's race. Widmeyer's up by 9 in Michigan. A Sooner poll has, and we talked about this race here, Cornett and Stilt. They're tied up. These are Republicans. Cornett and Edmondson. Edmondson's a Democrat, up by 8. And Stilt versus Edmondson. Edmondson does better, but only by 1. He's a Democrat there. Newsom versus Cox. Newsom's up by 24. That's in California. And here's a Harris poll. This is just approval rating. At 45. Harris, a very conservative poll. That generic ballot have Democrats up by 7. Rasmussen has DJ Trump at 46. Much lower in some other polls. We'll have that later. We'll get the ESPN now. And Major League Baseball, something we know. The D-backs were in Wrigley Field. Cubs, 6-7 Cubs finally win something for Butler. Eddie Butler, if I recall correctly. The White Sox were in California. Angels 12-8. The Phillies were in Cincy. Phillies 9-4. The Rays, where were they? They were in Cannon Yard. And Baltimore, Rays are 4-3. The Royals were in a Yankee Stadium. Yankees 7-2. The Mets were in Pittsburgh. Mets 12-5. The Twins were in Fenway Park and actually beat the Sox 2-1. Barnes was a loser there, I'm not sure. Orlando Rodney got a save. He's still going. That's for the Twins. The Nationals and Mariners in Seattle, a game we tuned in to, 10-7, 10-9, 10-3. Yeah. Nationals, the Nationals had 13 hits and the Mariners 10 hits. That's what I'm looking at there. The Dodgers in Atlanta. The Dodgers 8-2. They were in Atlanta. The Athletics and Rangers in Texas. Athletics 7-6. And the Brewers and Giants. This Brewers 7-5. High scoring game there. And that is sports, and it will do it for us. We'll see you on the week that was. On Saturday morning, we'll also see you on our Numbers Man. That's our financial report called This Week in Economics. That will be this weekend. And we move along. And on a Monday, on the same channels, we'll have the Monday morning quarterback. And hopefully we'll do the talk show edition next week. We'll see. Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll talk to you on tomorrow morning.